Welcome to the Solomon Success Show, where we explore the timeless wisdom of King Solomon and the Bible as it relates to business and investing. False prophets and get-rich-quick schemes are everywhere. Let's not be distracted by these. Instead, let's go to the source, the eternal principles that create a life of peace, power, and prosperity. Here's our host, Jason Hartman.
Welcome to the Solomon Success Show. This is Rabbi Evan Moffic. I'm a client and friend of Jason's, and he invited me to co-host the show with him. I'm a rabbi, so I'm speaking out of the depths, out of the wisdom of Jewish tradition, but I write and speak for people of all faiths. So I take the wisdom of the Hebrew Bible, of Solomon, the wealthiest and the most intelligent man ever to live, and I bring that wealth and apply it to the challenges we face today. The main challenge being, how do we live a happy, successful, and wealthy life in today's world? And when talking about a wealthy life, I'm not just talking about money. I'm talking about relationships, connection, a feeling of well-being, true happiness. And where in life do we need more wisdom, more insight, more time-tested truths than in the pursuit of a happy and meaningful life? And that's what you're going to find here today and every week. And if you want a sheet that I put together with 10 biblical verses on the connection between money and happiness, just text the word income, I-N-C-O-M-E, income. Text that word to the number 66866, and you'll get it automatically delivered. And what I want to talk about today is the meaning of freedom. And the reason freedom is on my mind is that we're getting close to the Jewish holiday of Passover. I bet many of you, even if you're not Jewish, have probably observed Passover at one point or another. Maybe you've been to a Passover meal. Maybe your church observes Passover, as many churches do. Maybe you've simply read about it, or you know the Exodus story, the story on which it is based. I wrote a whole book about Passover called What Every Christian Needs to Know About Passover. And Passover is about freedom. The freedom that's told in the story is the Israelite freedom, the Israelites leaving Egypt and going to the promised land, that God frees the Israelites through the plagues, through the splitting of the sea, through ultimately leading them across the Sinai wilderness into the land of Israel so they could worship God in freedom. That's the external story. That's the story we all know. But there's another layer to Passover, another layer, which is a story about internal freedom. Internal, what we look for inside of us. In fact, the Hebrew word for Egypt is Mizraim. Mizraim. And another way of understanding that word is, in the middle of it is the word tsar. And then im is just plural. It's like adding an S to a word. And the word tsar means narrow place. So tsarim is narrow places. And m is a prefix. So Mitzrayim is from narrow places. So God frees us from narrow places. Now, what does that mean? What is a narrow place? Well, I think of a narrow place as a self-imposed restraint. If you think of income property and what Jason Hartman teaches about how we pursue income property, many people think that the way to invest is just to buy stocks in the stock market, or the way to invest in real estate is to buy homes that have a good chance of appreciating. That's one way. But if we only think of investing that way, we're putting a self-imposed restraint on ourselves. We could think of so many other examples. Maybe some people think that the pathway to a successful life is you have to go to college, or you have to go to law school or medical school. Maybe that's just one path to success. Maybe there are many multiple paths to success. There are just an infinite number of self-imposed narrow ways of thinking that we impose on ourselves. And one of the things that we can do is to find the freedom, the abundant mindset to uncover them. And that's what we do during Passover, is we take specific actions to remind ourselves of our freedom and to reinforce that freedom. So, for example, During a Passover meal, we eat matzah. Matzah is unleavened bread. It's it's crunchy bread. And the point of it is that the Israelites did not have time to let their breads rise when they were leaving Egypt. They were in such haste to leave Egypt that they didn't have time to let their bread rise. They took it quickly before it was fully cooked and ate crunchy bread. And we eat that crunchy bread today to remind us of the preciousness of freedom, that freedom can be lost quite easily. Somebody once said that the one generation can separate a free society and a slave society. So freedom is precious, and we have to cherish that. And Passover, eating that leavened bread reminds us of that. Unleavened bread reminds us of that. Or, for example, another custom on Passover is to dip parsley, a symbol of spring, a symbol of growth, in salt water. The salt water is a symbol of the tears that the Israelites shed when they were leaving Egypt, or when they were enslaved in Egypt, So those tears are a reminder of the sacrifices that people make for freedom. And I think about right now, sacrifices. Think of all the healthcare workers, the doctors, the nurses, sacrificing themselves to help heal people who are suffering right now. But not only the doctors and nurses and healthcare workers, what about all the people working at grocery stores, people delivering meals, home healthcare workers who are helping their patients? Think of all of those people. Now, I'm fortunate. I can work from home. I can be at home. But that's a blessing. That's a true blessing. Now, of course, I'm making sacrifices, but the sacrifices I'm making pale in comparison to the sacrifices that others are making, and recognizing that the people making those sacrifices are essential to a life of freedom. That's something that at least is deeply resonating for me this Passover. And one other thing to think about. Passover gives us an opportunity to remind ourselves, to reinforce our appreciation for freedom. And right now, we don't have certain freedoms. If you live in a state that has shelter in place, you can't go out as you please. With so many stores closed, with so many places off limits, there are a few things we can do, and there are many things we cannot do. We don't have some of the freedoms that we take for granted. But we have the opportunity, if we are not sick, if we are, God help us, able to be in our homes, we can reflect and look inside and find the sources of freedom inside of ourselves. Maybe this can be a time for true self-examination. There's a custom in Judaism called Cheshbon Nefesh, which means an accounting of the soul, where we literally go through our actions over the past year and reflect on them and see where we can improve and where we might have done something differently. And that reflection actually enhances our freedom. It gives us a greater sense of choice and possibility. And maybe let's use this time to look inside of ourselves, to look at our actions, look at where we could have done better in the past and where we might be able to do better in the future. I hope this is a time of freedom and reflection for all of us. And I wish all of you shalom. And again, if you want that handout on money in the Bible, I picked 10 really good verses that illustrate different approaches. Just text the word income, INCOME, to 66866. And I look forward to seeing you again in a couple of days. Shalom.
Thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. Be sure to check out the show's specific website and our general website, hartmanmedia.com, for appropriate disclaimers and terms of service. Remember that guest opinions are their own, and if you require specific legal or tax advice or advice in any other specialized area, please consult an appropriate professional. And we also very much appreciate you reviewing the show. Please go to iTunes or Stitcher Radio or whatever platform you're using and write a review for the show. We would very much appreciate that. And be sure to make it official and subscribe so you do not miss any episodes. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.